what is clear to me is that the ANC is at the moment leading this country into a very difficult future, very difficult, because economy, trade is such an important sort of the pillar for this everything in this country, and if you really damage that, then what is left?
I met Professor Irina Filatova a few years ago. We had the privilege of interviewing her about Russia. She is from Russia. She is the preeminent expert here in South Africa on African-Russian affairs and is often interviewed by media organizations from other parts of the world. I thought it was about time, given that we haven't spoken for a while, to catch up, and also given so much that's happened with Russia and South Africa. We'll be talking with Professor Irina Filatova in just a moment. I hope I got that right. Do I address you as professor or doctor or?
Yes, look, I am Professor Emeritus of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, so that is absolutely fine. I have resigned from my Moscow university, so that's not applicable, but I am Professor Emeritus of KZN.
And how long ago did you cut your ties with Moscow, with the university there?
Well, I resigned last year, obviously. And the last time I was there was October 2021.
Well, it's really good to be talking with you, not just because of the Ukraine war being so much in the headlights, and it'd be fascinating to get your thoughts on that, but because there is a BRICS meeting in South Africa where it appears as though Vladimir Putin will be coming to the country, or so some people believe. And when he arrives here, South Africa is supposed to arrest him because of the International Criminal Court. You smile? Is this all a big charade?
I can promise that he is not going to be arrested, whatever happens, whether he comes or not.
Hmm. Is he a very close friend of the South African government?
I don't know whether he personally is a close friend, but Russia is certainly closest friend of the South African government. So I suppose Putin, as the president of the Russian Federation, is a close friend of the South African government.
Let's just go back a little bit into your history. You were born in Russia.
Yes, I was born in Russia, in Murmansk, where the British convoys brought some very good things during the war, and I was born just after the war.
And how did you actually come to South Africa?
And I specialized in African history, and I taught at Moscow State University. I graduated from Moscow State University as a specialist in African history, so I got all my degrees from Moscow State University, and I worked there for 19 years, ending as head of African Studies Department. And because the Soviet Union was not really very easily sending its specialists to Africa or to any other countries, I did not have a chance to acquaint myself directly with the African life and even to travel to Africa much. So when the chance appeared, I was interviewed for a position at the University of Durban-Westville, and they invited me to head the history department. After much deliberation, I decided to try, and it ended with me standing longer than I intended.
Why the interest in Africa?
That is a very interesting question. Why the interest in Africa is because I graduated from the university in 1970, and that was the time when the tightening of the screws in the society in the USSR. When after the Khrushchev saw when life was very much alive, and that's the time of my youth and so on. And then the end of the 1960s, that already was not so much so, and we felt it very, very deeply. There was, for example, Czechoslovakia and the Soviet troops in Czechoslovakia, and well, many other things. Brezhnev came to power, so it all started to change, and the kind of I wouldn't say freedom, but a relaxed atmosphere of my youth was ending. But Africa was an exception. And I met African students for the first time in something which was called the House of Friendship, which was a kind of a club which allowed contacts with foreigners. And there was an African seminar, and I was really taken by the debate, how African students, they were mostly African students there, how seriously African students debated issues of ideology, international politics, and they were absolutely free, and they insisted on their points of view being transferred in the media exactly as they were expressed by the students, even if they were their views might be not very fashionable. So I attended this seminar just out of curiosity. And then, of course, in the 1960s, Africa was the flavor of the day. So it was all very interesting. That's how I went to the university and to specialize in Africa.
So apart from coming here and being a professor at UKZN, you've also written 6 books, if I have it correct, and 4 of them more than that.
You know, how do you count? Do you count what I edited or whatever? I don't know. But do you count Russian books? Because there was, for example, a history of Kenya in Russian, and South Africans are not aware of it at all. So,
But you did co-author a number of them with Apollon Davison. What's
yes.
that connection?
Colin Davidson was my professor at the university. Not only mine, the number of the students whom he supervised, who under his direction defended their PhDs and second PhDs and doctorates and whatnot, is staggering. He still teaches. He still teaches at the university, and he will be 93 this year. So it is he is an amazing lecturer, an amazing personality, an amazing writer. Of course, he is now very, very old, but he is the person who carried his students with him. And gradually, I started writing together with him, researching and writing. It started with a book on the history of the Russian participation in the Anglo-Boer War. And then we co-edited together with American historian Sheridan Jones and another Russian historian, Valentin Gradnov. We published an edited edition of the documents of the Communist International on South Africa. These documents were previously closed. The archive was closed, and then in the early 1990s it opened. And there are 2 volumes of these documents that we published. And then, of course, the relations between Russia and South Africa in the Soviet era. And there's quite a selection.
It's just we fast forward to today. In a way, it would be strange to some people that the South African government remains so supportive of Russia. One would understand it during the Soviet era because the Soviet Union was a big supporter of the liberation movements in Africa and in particular the ANC. But where we are today, it's almost schizophrenic for some when they look at this very different Russia that we have today to the one that the ANC was friends with, and yet they're very friends with now. Just help us understand that relationship, please.
I think that one of the most important things that many South Africans do not see, particularly in the mainstream media, they look at this problem of support from the point of view of economic relations, and where South Africa has benefits, where it benefits for its economy, economic ties, trade, direct foreign direct investment, and so on. But the South African government and very many people in South Africa look at it from a completely different point of view. Russia, whether it is a capitalist country or a non-capitalist country, and it is now certainly not a socialist country anymore, but it is anti-Western, which to many South Africans, which this means anti-imperialist. In their minds, they are revolutionaries who were fighting against imperialism all their lives. They fought against apartheid, and apartheid was part of imperialist system. And Western countries did not quite support this struggle so very much as Russians. But it's not only the memory of that support, it's the present Russia's stand against the West, which again, for many South Africans who see themselves as revolutionaries, and there are many of them, it's not just the ANC or the majority of the ANC. It is EFF, it is Communist Party, it is trade unions, it is veterans of the struggle, and just a man in the street, so to say. If you speak with so many, particularly black South Africans, but not only, they see America, the West, as an enemy. So that's why.
But that is a little strange, given that the West is a far bigger trading partner and a much bigger investor in South Africa. Is there a disconnect between society and that reality?
I think there is. I think that the South African society is not used to thinking economically. It is used to thinking ideologically, and ideologically it is not disconnected at all. It is one thing. As far as the government is concerned, I think it knows perfectly well where its economic interests lie. But I think, and I don't know, I'm just guessing, I think that their idea is the West will not go away. We are too important. They also benefit from the trade with us, and they need us as a strategic partner. They do need us, and they are not going to go away. And that remains to be seen, because the world is dividing now, and each part is free to choose its partners in this division.
The Ukraine war has helped that division, or certainly accelerated it. And South Africa
Really?
appears to be very much on the side of a minority when you consider it with Western eyes. But I guess you can help us there. Is there a case to be made for South Africa's support of Russia?
Look, minority is a very interesting definition, because if you look at the resolutions of the United Nations, yes, South Africa is in a minority. But if you look deeper, if you look, for example, at how many countries observe Western sanctions against Russia, you will find that no, it is actually, particularly if you look, as many Russians do actually, and even Western observers do understand that and comment on it. If you look in the terms of the numbers of the population, the majority of the population of the world does not support the sanctions against Russia and does not support all the resolutions against Russia. Some, yes, but not all of them. So it is important, I think, to understand that South Africa sees itself as fighting against the unipolar world for a multipolar world. I think it sees itself in that this vision is wrong, because what it in effect is fighting for is the destruction of the unipolar world, but which is not going to be substituted with the multipolar world. Is going to be substituted with a bipolar world, just as it was during the Cold War. The multipolar world is a misnomer. It can't exist. There can be only two camps and some neutral countries, because where is this multipolarity? South African economy is too weak to become another pole, or even the whole of Africa. It cannot be a whole third or fourth or fifth pole in this multipolarity. So basically, South Africa is choosing this certain anti-Western side in this future bipolar world.
And bipolar meaning China on the one side and
China, Russia, and several other countries. There's a very interesting development now in Russia. United Russia Party. Just when the ANC visited, the ANC delegation visited the United Russia Party just now. What happened? It was just a tiny bit, a few days late, for an organizing meeting, inaugural meeting of the preparatory committee for a forum of supporters, countries which support, or parties rather, which support the struggle against neocolonialism and for multipolar world. This is United Russia Party, and organizing it, and now the ANC is joining this multipolar, the forum, which will take place in October in Russia. And I have tried so far, 14 countries have expressed the wish to join, but it is an interesting combination. It is BRICS countries apart from India, Mali, Myanmar, Pakistan, Syria, Venezuela, Vietnam, Zimbabwe, and now the ANC. So you see, these are the countries which would probably, and many more, which would probably tend to join this other pole with China and Russia. There will be some other who would not join it. I don't know, for example, whether India would join or not. But they perceive themselves as the countries which fight against neocolonialism. Neocolonialism is the colonialism of the mind, is accepting Western values and thinking in terms of Western values and fighting against this Western values and fighting against thinking in a Western way. This is neocolonialism, and they are going to fight against it.
Is that what's behind the Ukraine war?
No, I don't think so. I think that this idea of neocolonial thinking and anti-neocolonialism emerged as a result of the Ukraine war, because Russia needs to position it needs to offer an ideological agenda to the third world and to the former third world, but it needs to be attractive to the non-Western countries. It knows that it is not going to attract the West, or maybe some forces will be attracted by this narrative. But this narrative of a struggle is a very important word here. So the struggle against a unipolar world, against the domination of the West, against domination of the Western mentality, domination of Western values. This narrative is very attractive and very fashionable. If you think, for example, what Lindiwe Sisulu was speaking about, the Constitution, we need to get African values. We don't need such a constitution, which is a neoliberal. We don't need it. It's a Western constitution. We don't need it. So it's a very popular narrative.
Sure. If you take that, you extrapolate that to its end conclusion, it would be a very different South Africa if it were to adopt those kind of values rather than the values of freedom and free enterprise and individualism and people allowed to speak their minds. Is there any danger of that being imposed on the South African people?
I don't know. It remains to be seen. I don't think they can be imposed, but I think they can be accepted. If you think what is more important for South Africans, a democratic constitution, I mean the majority which is very poor and is struggling to survive, what is more important for them? Is it the constitution? Or is it the bread on the table? The idea that somehow the Western trade is connected with the bread on the table does not sink in. The other values are supposed to be to bring in the money, to bring in something better than the Western world. So far, democracy didn't provide. That's what I mean.
And so democracy is not fulfilling its promise.
No, it's the same sort of public mood which predominated in Russia and still predominates in Russia, particularly now, I would say, after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Soviets wanted democracy, particularly in the late 1970s, early 1980s. Everybody wanted democracy, the real democracy. And then when it came, it brought poverty, it brought collapse. And nobody had enough patience to build, and democratic values were not deeply ingrained in the Soviet society, and the disappointment, disillusionment was enormous. What is going on now is partially the result of that disillusionment.
So there are very clear parallels between what happened in Soviet.
I think so.
Where does it end, though? If you were to get into a time machine and go 5-10 years into the future and look back at today, what kind of a trajectory is this country likely to be on?
You mean South Africa? I don't know. It depends where the world is by then. But what is clear to me is that the ANC is at the moment leading this country into a very difficult future, very difficult, because economy, trade is such an important sort of pillar for this everything in this country. And if you really damage that, then what is left? Where do you get the money from to feed the population? You see, the people, the masses, as the ANC often call them, the masses may not understand the connection between the trade and the connection to the West and the infrastructure and so on, infrastructure of international relations. But the government should understand it.
When one has a look at the growing voices for independence of, in particular, the Western Cape, and I had an interesting discussion yesterday with the Cape Independence Support Group, and then got told today, but they don't know how far down the line we are. Is this some kind of an irresistible force? Because if you have in the north a group, a political group, which is proposing all of what we've discussed a moment ago, which does not augur well for the economy, and in the south, or in particular in the Western Cape, a different group that is much more aligned and much more perhaps connected with the understanding of if you throw away the West, you are going to bring on economic penury. It almost feels like there'll be a clash between those two ideas at the very least.
Well, I think that I do not see the two parties that could clash. I think that this is an unrealistic scenario. And the independence of the Western Cape, depending how you see it, you see there is a point of view, and it is a very popular point of view. I know that. Bill Johnson, for example, supports it, that you sort of get that independence incrementally. You get more and more and more functions which the state cannot fulfill, implement, and you go and take over these functions, and then you do it, you implement it. And it is a very attractive scenario. But Western Cape doesn't have a protectable border. And if it is economically successful, you see, where is that border which will stop, even if there is no military intervention on the part of the central government? Where is the border which will stop the migrants from the rest of South Africa and all the rest of Africa, at least the countries which are close by, to come to a successful bid that works? So it is a very difficult question. Functions, yes, it is possible to do more than the central government does, but I don't know whether it is possible to have a really independent country within another country or to secede.
So the outlook for South Africa, given what you've painted, is pretty gloomy. Is there any upside? Is there any way of changing this path?
South Africa is very undertaking. I mean, people are entrepreneurial. That's the better word for it. And they have shown it over and over and again, and I hope that it would work. And also, I do believe that, the Institute of Race Relations have made several polls about the race feelings in South Africa. I do believe that down somewhere down there, the feelings are really good. And if politicians did not stir hatred and did not stir the sort of trying to find the scapegoats, that it could be a great country if that can be corrected.
So 2024, what are you seeing happening in the election?
I don't. The 2024, I don't see the ANC losing power. That is certainly not true. That cannot happen. And I think that either there will be a pact with the EFF, or I do not exclude the Russian assistance to the ANC in the 2024 elections. There could be donations, there could be assistance in the how should I put it? Assistance in organizing the elections in a more favorable way to the ANC. So Russia has a lot of experience in that, and I think that it could share its expertise. And so everything is possible. But even without the Russian assistance, EFF and the ANC is enough to not let the ANC sleep off power. And the idea that the ANC may split, I don't know that this is possible. It seems a very attractive idea, but patronage systems are irresistible. They will keep it afloat.
So the John Steenhuisen Moonshot Pact of getting all the opposition parties together, does that appear as though it's, given the reality of what you've just outlined now with the ANC, EFF, and support from Russia, from a huge sovereign state, does that appear as though it's a fool's errand?
I don't know. It's a very good idea. Whether it is, it can be materialized, whether it can be implemented or not, I really do not know. It's for the South Africans to decide what they want. And it is not impossible. It would be great if they could agree on the main policies. But again, whether it is possible to implement such a union, I'm not sure. It's just the beginning of this process, and I hope they can work something out, but let's see.
And just to close off with, you said that the Russians could support the ANC in retaining power. Practically speaking, what kind of support would that be? We've seen Vexelberg give them quite a lot of money already, and that has been disclosed.
I don't know whether foreign governments or foreign parties can donate some money for the election campaign or to the local parties. I simply don't know what the law says. But if it is possible, I do not see why Russia cannot make such donations, which could be very beneficial for the ANC. But also, the way the Russian elections are usually organized is that the votes that are being put into the box are not necessarily the votes that are counted. And there are all sorts of technologies to organize such practice. And I think that, of course, the opposition parties here would be watching. But after all, there were a lot of opposition parties in Russia that were watching. And every time, United Russia won, even though the polls said that it shouldn't.
Professor Irina Filatova, who's from Russia and an expert in the Russia-Africa relations. And I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.